And well, before actually we go into the details, we have to see the frame we are in. So why the sense of such an analysis? Why now? And is it, in the end, is it possible? Is it possible to look into the future, so to speak? Well, and it is necessary. Why at all? Because it is necessary. Because we all are aware, and I mean, everybody in the world is aware, that things have changed to a degree that is, that was not expected by anyone, and that we are moving into an unknown future. And now, as we have background information coming from a prophecy, and I'm a very practical person, you know, a prophecy can be true or not. So we have a movement into an unknown future, and we have, let's say, an expectation that it will lead to a special changing point in 2027. But 2027 is still a lot of time away. And how can we travel that unknown time we have entered? And is there anything that could be a reliable help? And as I have worked with the transit field since really many, many years, I can assure you the transit field is a reliable source of information. And why exactly when the first lockdowns came last spring, it was exactly 7 years before the day when Pluto will for the first time enter the 6th line in the 41. That 6th line, we are therefore in a 7-year cycle of endings. Ra always has said something old. And this is what will happen. And this is why it is necessary, or not necessary, but very helpful to try to get an idea about the dynamic we will very likely have to face. And yes, it is possible because the movement of the planets, they are relatively sure, they are relatively reliable, they are not going to change in that sense, they are not leaving what our ephemeris says. Okay. Now, everything takes part in a frame, is part of a frame. And our frame has started a long time ago. Actually, it has started, as you know, or most of you will know, in 1610. And this is just a picture of the Orion cloud that has been discovered in 1610 when our cycle has started, actually. Now, as we can see, that has been a long time that is coming to an end. We all know that. And that it is coming to an end is a very important frame. And it is part of a huge, huge, huge cycle. Very, very huge cycle. You see, if you look at the movement of the axis of the Earth, one hexagram in the average takes 403 years, one line takes 67 years, and one color a little bit more than 11 years. And I want to point your awareness for a moment to the color, because we have entered color, which is in that case the first one, because the movement of the axis of the Earth is retrograde. So in the same way as it started in the 6th line of the hexagram, it starts in the first line in the 6th color and will end in the first color, and the first color is fear. And if you count that back, what you can see is that till 2015 around autumn, the beginning of autumn, there was the second color, the color of hope. And in 2015, we also had some event that changed at least many societies. That was that huge wave of fugitives coming more or less from Africa to Europe. And in the autumn of 2015, we moved from hope to fear, and everything changed. So we have to understand, we are in a first line period, and the first line is about weakness and strengths. And as we are in a movement of dissolution, that first line gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And to the same degree as that first line gets weaker, the fear gets stronger. And that is something we actually could observe very clearly. Everything now, everything is ruled by fear. And this will not go away till 2027. So you better watch your fears, because they may not be your fears, you know. That is a huge conditioning force, at least for the collective. And as we are part of the collective, even if you are individuals, you cannot change that you are part of the collective. We have to handle it. The fear, so to speak, is also a part of the transit field, but it is a part of the transit field we normally do not look at. So now, just to give you a taste of what happened when the last cycle started, well, a lot of interesting discoveries have been made. Before the last cycle started, still a great scientist like Giordano Bruno got executed as Heretian by Grecian. So the old is always fighting to the end. And well, in 1618, 8 years after the cycle started, there was the famous war of 30 years in Europe that decreased the population between 33 and 40%. These are the winds of change. So what we need to understand in order to have a very condensed look at the transit field, condensed because we do not have eternally time here, and we have to look at a long time, that is especially the pendulum movements, I will explain that in a second, and the planetary quality, and then of course combined with the gates, in order to get a picture, in order to get a basic idea how these 7 years, or now 6 years, almost 6 years, are programmed to unfold. Now, what I mean when I talk about pendulum movements, so I have to move here something first. So what you can see is we have, of course, we have our circle. And in that case, we are looking at Uranus. And what you have here is, what you can see is, in 2014, Uranus entered gate 51. Gate 51 being here. And after having entered in the 51, as all slow-moving planets are going directly and then retrograde, so Uranus goes back to the 21, turns around, comes back to the 51, passes through the whole hexagram, reaches the next one, the 42, again turns around, goes back to the 51, and finally enters the 41 definitely. And this is the typical movement of all slow-moving planets. So therefore, we should never expect a planet to stay without any interruption in a gate. It is going on and back, on and back. It is like 2 steps ahead and 1 step back, 2 steps ahead and 1 step back. That is the principal movement. And these different entrances, they have their specific quality. So, now, if you want to have an overview, and what we will do today must be an overview, we can and should make things a little bit simpler, because we cannot just look at one planet. Our target for today is to look at Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus together. And in order to make that, we need a little bit of simplified perspective. So looking at that example of Uranus, we can say the range of Uranus in gate 51 in that example started in May 24, 2014, and it ended in January 19, 2017. That is the range, which does not mean Uranus has been in the 51 all the time. That's what you have seen through the pendulum movement. But from the first to the last moment, we had that period, well, of more than 2.5 years, where Uranus was mainly in the 51. So now we will start to look at Pluto, because that is our first one. Pluto is the slowest one. It is the ruler of the cycle. And it is, you can imagine, I always imagine the transit field like different musicians in an orchestra. And Pluto, that is the one sound that gives the deepest frequency. Yeah, it is a very, very deep, slow frequency. It changes very rarely. It moves very slowly. And during the period of time we are interested in now, you can see here the range of Pluto in different gates, and the ones before 2018 we will not look at here, of course. And what comes after 2027 we also will not look at. So we will focus on the time we are in now, that has started in March 2018, and that will end in February 2028. So therefore we look at the 61, the 60, and the 41. And what you can see easily, all gates here, all gates from 2010 till after 2028, all gates are gates at the root. So the ruler of the cycle is bringing pressure and pressure and pressure and pressure and pressure, and then a little bit of pressure. So pressure rules the world. That's the first thing to understand. We have different kinds of pressures, of course, but there is pressure. The only exception is the 61, which is not a root gate, but still a pressure gate. So here you can see it in the wheel. It is, of course, it is a very short way, so to speak. 3 hexagrams we will be talking about, and the 61 will be our entrance point. So now we have to start to slow down a little bit. The 61, that is the gate Pluto is still in. You can see the range, first entrance till last day of living. The range is 1,709 days. That's a pretty long time. But if you look detailed, you can see a specific rhythm of Pluto. That is the usual rhythm Pluto has. It makes a first short entrance, 3 months, as you can see here. Then it goes out, back to the hexagram that was there before. Then it comes back, and then it also is staying much longer. Again, it goes back, it leaves. Then comes the big period, the long period. That is something like a year and 8 months. That's a very long period without interruption. It goes out and comes back, and is in, then that's again a smaller wave, and finally a very small. So it is small, middle, big, middle, small. Yeah, that is the rhythm it has. And with long-term transits, we have to understand that long-term transits, when we are talking about programming, each transit changes your body. That is something you have to understand. A transit means that the program is directly influencing, biologically, physiologically influencing your body and therefore your bodily functions. And the longer that takes place, the longer the transit has been already, the stronger it becomes. Because in biology, I mean, these are biological processes, and they get stronger and easier the longer they last. So that means that the first entrance is not felt so strongly, except the first few days, because there is a change, and change is always easy to observe. But then it is not going so deep, it is like a first taste. It is not the big thing yet, it's a first taste. The second entrance is deepening. The third one, the big period, is, well, creating the real change. And the fourth and the fifth wave, they are like the last calls of the transit. And often in these last days, these relatively last periods, there are the impact on what is happening in the world is strongest. That is something that is also different a little bit from planet to planet. But for Pluto, we can very well formulate it like that. So now what does the 61 mean with Pluto? In that case, of course, we are also looking a little bit back, because the period has started already in 2018. And as you can see, the last day of that transit will be in November 2022. So it's not like the 61 is going away right now. It is still there. You can see it here. We will have it from June 2021 till January 2022, and then one short period again in 2022. So a lot of pressure from above, this time not from the root, but from above. And this is, well, it has such a nice name, our inner truth. And in personal analysis, okay, yes, it is a pressure. It can bring genius questions, it can bring crazy questions. But if you are talking about the development of the world, meaning the collective actually, that means that everybody has a headache. Everybody has a headache, and that needs a reason, of course. The program creates the reason that is shown in the gate. So where does the question come from? This is what you cannot see. This is the limitation we have to understand. We can look at the program and we can see the dynamic of forces, but we cannot know what will be the form of these forces. And there's always the temptation to guess, like to speculate, what could it be? To a certain degree that can make sense, but one has to be very, very cautious and very much aware that we literally do not know. So whatever we may imagine now can be an illustration, but it is not a prognosis. I will try to make examples illustrating that. So for now, as everybody is crazy about Corona, it is clear that the not knowing, the topic of not knowing, that the transit has brought, has found through Corona a crystallization point. Because nobody knows. Actually, nobody knows. And this is now almost going on for a year. Nobody really knows. And well, nevertheless, everybody speaks. But this is how we are, we humans. But the truth is, there is the question and there is no answer. Now, understanding what that means also includes to look on the other side. On the other side, you have the 24. And the 24 is the returning. It is the returning that gets pressurized. And the returning is a funny thing. It is potentially a mutative gate, of course, but it does not come out like that. The 61 always asks a new question. It is aware of not knowing and of not knowing something that is important, because you do not know so many things, but you don't care. So there is no pressure. But if there is something that is very important for you to know, and you do not know, then you have a pressure. And as that works in pulses, as everything individual, you all have made this experience already in the past year, that the pressure can be enormous. So, and what does it bring out in the 24? It brings out the old. That's why it's the returning. It brings out the old first. You know, a new question is arriving, and the first thing we do is giving the old answers. That's what you could see. I mean, you have a virus. And then what are the people doing? They are closing the borders, and there are the soldiers standing at the border, as if that could stop the thing. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it is the mechanic that first comes the returning of the old. And the period we are in right now is that slowly but surely, let's say the collective starts to realize that the old answers may not work. They obviously do not work. And this creates the pressure for a mutation. In that case, a mutation of knowing. Now, as that leads to differentiation, we are in the knowing circuit, so that is not a collectively homogenized answer or knowing that will come out of that. It leads to a differentiated knowing. And when I say knowing, I'm obviously using the key term of the circuit, but that is not saying that it is true. If you know as a person, as a human being, you say, I know, you are deeply convinced. Yes, you are deeply convinced, but it doesn't need to be true. So we have a pressure that first brings back the old, what we have seen already very well. The old will not work, and therefore the pressure really gets directed into the direction of mutation, and that leads to a diversification of knowing. And some of that may be true, and some of that may not be true. So in the end, for the collective, there is no knowing. Yeah? The knowing is, if at all, in the individual, but there is no common knowing in the collective that comes out of that. So the pressure of not knowing does not go away. And this is what drives people sometimes mad. We have to see that the Plutonian quality is absolute. Pluto is always indicating the topic you cannot avoid. You cannot avoid. You have to confront. Everybody has to confront it. And if we, for one moment, are looking at the personal level, you and me, then of course the most important thing is not to become a victim of the wrong question. I mean, this is a transit that is very, very dangerous to mental health. And the danger, of course, is much greater if you give authority to the mind. Because imagine if you give authority to the mind and you do not know, that is terrible. It means you cannot decide. There is the illusion you must know, mentally know, in order to make a decision. And this is the great mistake. And if you are in that mistake, you can get totally fascinated with all kind of dark, mysterious questions. I mean, the 61 is already the gate of mysteries. And then we have Pluto, the dark, the lord of the underworld, the hidden. So it is like, it is fitting very well in the gate. But I would say it does not bring out its best qualities. So You have, therefore, within the collective, you have a huge number of people. They are totally fascinated with very dark questions. They have absolutely no personal value. And they are moving, as groups, as parts of the collective, they are moving in the direction of mental insanity. Yeah, this we have to understand. This is a world that moves in the direction of mental insanity because it is not able to understand that the knowing is not in the mind, but in the body. And this is, everything has two sides. Everything has two sides. This is the great potential of the transit. Not only for us, who are, let's say, actively in a process that is moving from the mind as authority to the body as authority, but in the collective. If you have tried so hard, but you do not arrive at the knowing by mind, what can you do? What can you do? You have to look for another kind of truth, for another kind of inner truth. The true mutation is not about a new knowing. The true mutation here is about recognizing that the knowing is in the body and never in the mind. For you personally. For you personally. But for the collective, of course, the collective in that sense does not have one body, you see? So in the collective remains that terrible pressure of not knowing, leading to different answers, leading to the ongoing separation of society, where certain groups are grouping around a specific new knowing, and other groups are grouping about a different knowing, and there is no bridge. And there is no bridge. So there is a mental separation taking place that can lead, nevertheless, some may have a knowing that works and others not. But it is impossible to judge by mind. That is the dilemma. And this is the dilemma of the present, as we still have Pluto in the 61. This is the great dilemma of the present in the collective. And for us on personal level, there are two things. First of all, follow your body and do not allow your mind to dictate because there is pressure. You do not follow pressure. Pressure is never meant to lead you. Secondly, as we cannot avoid to get fascinated by very new questions, we cannot avoid that, it's the program. Pick a question that can make sense to you. I mean, if you spend the rest of this year investigating Mr. Bill Gates, it will not help you. Yeah, whatever you will find out will not help you. It will not make your life in any way better. So please don't do that bullshit. But if you find a question you can investigate that can principally be answered, and the answer could make your life better, then the transit can be to your advantage. You are not necessarily a victim of the transit. You cannot change it, okay. But you still can use it in a way that is good for you personally. So, depending from what are your fields of interest, that can be a time of great inspiration, of great mental inspiration. But still, of course, this is never meant to make our decisions, no matter how attractive it may look. So, this is where we are right now and what will accompany us in the end till November 2022. Now, it always can get worse.
Oh, shit.
So, we have Pluto in 60, and as you can see, very soon, in March of 2021, we have that first, you see that five-fold movement of Pluto, first wave, second wave, main wave, middle wave, end wave. So we have Pluto in the 60. And gate 60, I bet most of you are aware, we had enough of gate 60 last year, didn't we? 8 months, Saturn, 8 months in 60. So we know what gate 60 can mean. That being imprisoned in some way, the pressure of the limitation. But you know, Pluto is a very different dimension from Saturn. Saturn is demanding patience, discipline, not giving up. Yeah, very, very old-fashioned guy, Saturn. But Pluto is the one limitation we will not be able to avoid. And as you can see, for a very, very long time. It enters in March 2021. It will leave in December 2025. That is a very, very long time. And therefore, we have to ask ourselves, what does this kind of limitation, what is different, for example, compared with Saturn? Well, first of all, something you cannot avoid, and you cannot avoid globally. It is the ruler of the cycle. Where Pluto is, everybody gets affected by. And what is a limitation? What is a limitation? Yes, it is a pressure to mutate. Of course, it is a pressure to mutate, because the limitation typically comes from the past. Right? Gate 60 being genetically the gate of the old. And generally speaking, the limitation comes from some past. So, but we have, limitation is everywhere. Actually, everything that exists is a limitation. Whatever describes you is a limitation. Whatever describes a society is a limitation. So what is the difference? Again, the difference, it is not just a limitation. It is the pressure of a limitation. And when does a limitation pressurize us? That is an interesting question, isn't it? Well, first of all, if you do not respect it. Limitations, they are like walls around you. And if you sit in the middle of the space, you have no pressure. But if you keep running against the wall, you definitely have pressure. And limitation of what? Given our global society, what could be the limitation we cannot avoid? Well, here we are at the edge of speculation, but there are some things, they are very, very likely. Now, as Corona has dominated the media and the collective consciousness for so long, it is very tempting to assume that this limitation will have something to do with Corona. Is that possible? Yes, it is, but it is by far not sure. I give you an example. Well, there will be consequences of 2020 and 2021, consequences that will follow, and they very, very, very likely will be there on the economical level. So, okay, I mean, when you had the great economical problems in the 20th century, they called it the Great Depression. Now, gate 60 is the most depressive, potentially the most depressive gates of all. And if you have Pluto sitting there altogether more than 3 years, so there is some depression to be expected. And an economical one would be, let's say, an educated guess. But while there have been economical limitations over and over and over again. What makes that one so special? And here the frame in which we are becomes so important. If we agree that we are at the end of something, moving to the end, we have to ask ourselves what exactly is ending. And if we are talking about the economy, the time of from the industrialization to the so-called information age, all of that was based on one thing only: growth. More, more, more. Yeah, the generators lose. Huh? Make more, make more, make more, and grow and grow and grow. And everything, the whole structure, the whole economical structure of the planet is built on the assumption that there is eternal growth, which in an obviously not infinite world is a madness in itself. You cannot have infinite growth in a limited world. A limited world. Guys, we are reaching the end of growth now. There will be no growth. We are moving into the decrease later. So the first step is not the decrease. The first step is the stop of growth, the limitation of growth. Now, that sounds relatively harmless because the limitation of growth is not a catastrophe, actually. It is the possibility and the challenge to maintain what is, just to maintain it. So why is it such a problem? Okay, an example illustrating. You all know McDonald's. McDonald's is a very profitable company. Yet, they have built debts of $17 billion. So one of the very, very huge, very, very profitable companies owes different kind of banks $17 billion. Why do you give $17 billion to a company? Because you expect them to grow further and therefore being able to pay you back. You see, the moment, and the moment is not so far away. All these clever guys in their suits, they think they understand. The very moment they start to see that the growth is coming to an end, oh boy, that will change everything. Economy is basically psychology. Everything being based on the hope of growth, on the paradigm, on the imperative of growth. And then you have to realize the growth is over. Oh, the Great Depression, the limitation, the wall, and they will try to run against the wall, believe me. But the wall is too thick this time. The wall will not break. The wall will stay. And while we can imagine that it has a lot of consequences, a lot of different consequences, not only in economy, of course, but in societies in general. I mean, it is already very difficult to distribute resources if you have relatively much of them. But it gets very, very difficult to distribute them if they are not growing anymore, if there is no hope of more, if there is the best you can reach, the maintaining of what you have. So you can see that all the conflicts in societies, especially, of course, regarding resources and the distribution of resources, must sharpen, and they will surface where the weak points are in a given society and make it more and more difficult to reach peaceful conclusions. So, the end of growth. So, what does it mean on the personal level? After all, yeah, we also are living our own lives. On personal level, that is a transit that will not be easy, but it brings a great, great potential. If you are in a society, in a world that is under pressure of limitation, you will have to meet your own limitations coming from the past, from your childhood, from your genetics, from what you think, from what you have experienced, you name it. And in confronting these limitations, there is always a chance transcending them. So the limitation has not to be seen on a personal level as a problem. It is a challenge. It is a challenge. And if you live who you are, there still is limitation. You cannot change that. But there is always the possibility to handle it in a way that is correct for you. And the handling in the 60 must always be based on the acceptance of the limitation. And I'm talking here about both things, the limitation in society, because you cannot change it, and the limitation that turns up in your own life. So we need a spirit here. We need the spirit of a fighter. We need the spirit of a warrior. We need the spirit of somebody who is ready to face what is coming, because he or she is him or herself. I mean, hey, guys, you are here today. And you are here today because you have been born for this time. You are not too weak to face it. You are the ones made for the time. You are the observers. You are the testimonials. You are the ones who have come for this time. So don't be afraid of that limitation. But it will need awareness and it will need discipline, because gate 60 is not a nice gate to experience. And it is a long depression, as you can see, a very long one. So you better have something in your life you like, at least yourself. Well, and then comes our famous 41. That is the decrease. And the decrease does not start in 2027. No. It starts in 2024. Things are moving fast now. That is, as you can see, the first very, very tiny entrance. And then from 2025 on, it gets bigger till it reaches, here we have not the 5-wave picture, we have a 4-wave picture, very rare. And you can see we have that enormous period of decrease starting in December 2025 and ending in February 2028. So this is, well, what is decrease? Decrease is a deep cut eventually leading to a new beginning. And as that is the period where we may expect that the old is significantly coming to an end, it makes a lot of sense that there is a deep cut. Yes. So what is the difference to the 60? Both are pressure gates. The 60 was the limitation. It says you cannot go further. The road you are walking ends here. There is no next step on that road. That is the limitation. And the 41 is the less. The 41 is a less, the decrease, the cut. So in what way that will come, I will not even try to speculate, because as things are moving so fast and as so many unexpected things are always turning up, yeah, I mean, if you want, you can speculate, but I personally do not see any sense in that. But it is important to understand, I mean, if we are prepared on the inner level of ourselves, for what is coming. It is much, much, much easier to handle it. And the less of something, creating a pressure, well, there can be many things they are less, but very likely, of course, it will have to do with resources. And well, you know, the 41 is looking to the 30. And the 30, that is that longing to get something back you had once. Yeah, at least the feeling you want to get back. But you don't, you know, you don't. The 41 is the period of letting go, and of letting go many, many, many things you have been used to have that can be very unspectacular things. It's like there is this cafe around the next corner. You may not have been in that cafe, but you could go in there when you wanted. And now you pass it by and you cannot enter it. It is, for now, it is like gone. It is like gone. Let's say temporarily gone. Well, and imagine how it is if you pass that cafe in 5 years from now and you know it will never open again. It is gone. There was a cut, it is gone. We will all have to let go of many, many things. And it is not easy, especially the things you love. That is the difficulty, letting go what you love. That is the pain. So, what are we doing with that? Well, there is no new beginning without letting go, guys. You see, we tend to think letting go is a part of life. This is not true. Life is letting go. With each breath, you let go. It is very difficult to breathe in if you hold your breath, you know. Actually, if you do it too long, you will die. Life is letting go. Your cells, they are dying each moment and then replaced by fresh ones. And this is the process that comes for our world, that we have to let go of an old world so that a new one has a chance to emerge. And you see, it is very important to have that perspective. In gate 30, we also have the wishful thinking. I call it the wishful thinking, the false hope. And the collective, as collective, will have incredible difficulties of letting go, because that is not, how shall I say, that is not in their range of understanding and accepting. So they will try to stay in the illusion of getting back what has been gone already and will not come back. If that is your frame of understanding, it is very, very difficult to make a correct, good decision for yourself in the world as it will be then. But if you understand that this is the end of something, and after that there may be a new beginning that is based on totally different paradigms, and very likely different kinds of living together as humans, then it still may hurt, it may be difficult. But out of that perspective, it is much easier to let go. And then we will see. Then we will see what the next morning brings. Because what the next morning brings for now is hidden to us. We may make the same look in the next 7 years in 2027. But for now, we will end with that. So that was a very, very short summary of the Plutonian movement. And let's say in what direction it is leading to. So, now comes our Lord of the Deep, Neptune the Great Dissolver. And Neptune is very slow. Right now, Neptune is very, very slow. It is only, during that 7-year cycle, it is only passing through 4 gates, as you can see. The time of the 22 is almost over already, almost. Then comes the 36, then comes the 25, then comes the 17. So we are obviously in the first incarnation cross quarter. We are in the initiation. So Neptune dissolves in order to allow something new to be initiated, brought into the world. So Neptune in 22, the big periods of that we have had already. You can see that in May 2021, the main period of Neptune in 22 is finished. And then in 21, from August 2021 till March 2022, there will be the last movement in that gate. And I mean, Neptune is always a little bit tricky to interpret, because on the one hand, it brings the dissolution of an old form, and on the other hand, it brings something that is kind of borderless, that oceanic quality. And Neptune always works in a way that is hidden. So a Neptunian transit, if Neptune starts a transit in a new gate, very likely you will not even notice for some time, because it's literally working in the depths of the unconscious. And there it works, and you are not aware, and you cannot be aware, and nobody is aware. And it is like the water under a wall. And at some point, the water has washed away the terrain the wall has been standing on, and then the wall falls down. In that moment, the Neptunian impact becomes visible. And of course, there is no defense, because it has been already. It is, when you see it, it is the last moment. So there is just no defense. Now the 22 is such a beautiful gate, grace. The openness in social interaction. And when the transit started, you can see it started in 2019. Our old world was still intact. What a nice year was 2019. And did you recognize anything? No, you didn't. But can we agree that we have a dissolution of social openness now? I mean, an almost ridiculous one. If I'm jogging on a road that is 3 meters or more wide, people, they are coming into my direction, they move their head away, press their mask against the nose, and trying to have the maximum distance from me. I mean, social openness, where is it? It's gone. Neptune, the great dissolver. On the collective level, it means something different. It is the topic, the thematic, the question to tune in the collective, to be open for something or not. And this is, for example, one of the great fights you can see everywhere, that different groups of interests or governments are trying to tune in the collective to their truth, which in most cases means to their advantage, the truth that serves their advantage. And this is, we could say, the fight for openness, or let's say at least the competition for openness to that political opinion, or to that measures, or to that company or technology or whatever. So On the other hand, we have, and you all have experienced that, all of you who are working with human design, you had a good year last year, didn't you? The interest has been growing. You know, people realized that they don't know, and they got more open. They got more open to what? To something new, something mutative. 22, wanting to hear something that goes beyond the normal, the old stuff. So on the one side, we have the dissolution of the social openness. On the other side, we have an opening to all kinds of new mutational stuff, which is not in any way a judgment about the quality of new, mutational, and so on. That it's new and mutational does not mean it must be good, if I say it in a rather simple way. So, and this question of what is the collective open or close to will obviously be valid, an important question, an important topic till March 2022. At the same time, the openness for new things of all kind will also be there. And you see, that is also a mutational gate. We are still in the knowing circuit. And by that, if we have an openness for something mutational, but the openness itself is differentiated, again, that does not lead to one dominant thing. It leads to many different things. Yeah? Many different whatever. Yeah? But we are open to many different mutational things, and they are grouped. And because the social openness is reduced or going away, people spend much more time with themselves. That means, on the one hand, less conditioning, less direct conditioning. And on the other hand, of course, if there is less exchange with others, it is easier to stay totally in your own inner world. Therefore, these are necessary steps as we move in the era of the individual. I mean, people are totally homogenized. How are they supposed to become individuals? I mean, not all will get a reading from us, I'm afraid. So there must be, let's say, some huge mechanic at work. And this is one of them. That limited openness leads to a certain kind of differentiation. It may not make you an individual right now, but it splits you away from that big homogenized collective. Now, the next gate is very, very important. Neptune in gate 36, the gate of the crisis, the darkening of the light. So that is the gate where the real change is starting. And I very consciously say starting, because as I have told you before, the beginning of an Neptunian transit is very often not spectacular at all. It is working underneath the surface first. But we will get, as you can see, we will get a first taste very, very soon. Because in May 2021, so let's say in 4 months from now, Neptune enters for the first time the 36. And as you can see, for 3 months, that is one of these classical first tastes. Then it goes out for a relatively long time, back in the 22. And then, that is very, very important. I mean, look, more than 2 years, without interruption in the 36. While at the same time, Pluto is in the 60. So the keynoting is not difficult. A limitation you cannot avoid leads to a crisis, or a deep crisis leads to limitations you cannot avoid. So this is the pair, the Pluto in the 60 and the Neptune is the 36. This pair in that period, very roughly from 2022 till 2024, they are doing that groundwork of dissolution. You know, that brings down, that starts to bring down that, that tower, that great tower of Babylon. And of course in slow motion, of course in slow motion. But the moment the tower falls down, it actually falls down, it falls fast. But that is at the end of the transit and not at the beginning. Now, the 36 also means, of course, let's say new experiences. New experiences as a collective, and well, let's say for most of us. It can be actually very interesting. But it can only be interesting if you are secure in yourself. You see, most people base their security on the assumption that tomorrow will be the same as today. And for a long time, that has worked to a certain degree. I mean, change, there always has been change, of course. But the dimension of change we will face is new for us, at least for us. Yeah. The generation who has lived through the Great Wars is more or less has died out. And people that are on that planet right now, they, let's say in many, many countries had a relatively good time. And there is change. And many people are afraid of change. It brings the unexpected. It brings something your mind cannot calculate and live in the illusion of knowing. And yet, you see, what is strategy and authority? Till 1 year ago, it was pure luxury. It was pure luxury. You could easily survive without strategy and authority. It was pure luxury. It was like, oh, I can live my own life. How nice. But human design is not only for the good weather. Human design is for always. Human design is the navigation in the great storm. And for me, you know, I see these surfers. They ride a wave that is 30, 40 meters high. And if you cannot ride the wave, it will crash you. It will kill you in a moment. But if you are a surfer of this quality, you enjoy it. It is the ride of your life. And this is what it is supposed to be for us. Strategy and authority is the necessary skill to ride the waves of destiny. And this is a big wave coming. Neptune in 36 is a great, great wave of destiny coming. But if you are able to surf it, it may become the greatest adventure of your life. And this is the attitude again we need. In the same sense as the limitation is the potential to become renewed yourself, to become freed from old stuff you don't need anymore. The 36 can become the great adventure of your life. But you can only surf that wave if you know how to decide for yourself as an individual, independently from everybody else. Because what may be right for me would not work for you and vice versa. There is nobody you can orient yourself on except yourself. And this is the biggest change, isn't it? I mean, hey, be honest. How many times do you really make a totally independent decision? That is not easy. It takes a long, long, long time, and your mind never stops. But this is the jump. That is the new experience. That is the new adventure that is waiting. and to a certain degree must be met in order to surf that wave. Well, and then comes something that is very, very difficult to interpret. Neptune in 25. Well, obviously we are in a mystical channel here. We have the beautiful name of innocence. And we have on the one hand the great dissolver, and on the other hand the great openness, the limitlessness, we could say. And the 25 itself is a mysterious gate. We know it belongs to everything. It belongs to every object. It is the gate of all existing. There is no deeper gate in the body graph. There is no deeper place within our illusion. Now, on a very, very superficial level, if you look at the channel of initiation, there is an ego connected to the Chi, that is an ego that wants to go over borders. And where does it go to in the end? To the self. And the self is our illusion. It is the basic illusion of our species that we have an individual self. That's why we have an individual right. We are designed to have an individual right. So, what is the dissolution in the 25? Well, you know, the 25 in most cases is not innocent. It is literally the gate of the masks. People pretending a specific identity. They may be convinced actually about that identity, but it is not their true identity. And in many cases, of course, it's a conscious pretension. Now, how could it be after the 36, the dissolution of the false identities? Because nobody cares anymore to pretend something. You know, very special times, they lead to truth. They lead to more truth. And the truth may not always be a pleasant one, but you know, think about people you have in your life. Think about yourself. Are you sure you know who these people are in your life, who they really are? Are you sure you know who you really are? So, one educated guess, we will see a lot of truth because the false identities get dissolved. Very likely because they are of no use anymore. The other thing, of course, is that in the 25, we know that is a gate that gets shocked. Not the 25 is here to get shocked, so to speak. And in the shock, what does a shock lead to? It leads you into the unknown. A true shock always leads you into the unknown. But in the unknown of yourself. So, we are moving in the unknown. It is another way to express that we are moving in the unknown. And there, these old false identities are falling apart. They are of no use there. Because in the true unknown, you cannot prepare for the true unknown. You cannot. There is no textbook for the unknown. You have only yourself there. You have to meet yourself there. But that is more the personal part of the transit. What does it mean collectively? Well, we will see. I mean, the collective is moving into the unknown, and the unknown is the unknown. I mean, it makes sense, right? The 36 brings you into a new direction, into a new experience, the collective and each individual. And where are we going to then? Into the unknown. And there we will find out about ourselves. We also, I guess, will find out about the true quality of our collectives. If that will be innocence, we will see. Well, and Neptune, not to forget, has a very spiritual side. There is the psychic attunement. There is a quality so fine that it is almost not part of the world anymore. So there may be a collective move. Well, I don't want to say into a mystical direction, but in a more spiritual direction. I mean, if you look at the cross of planning and you look at the cross of the sleeping phoenix, the movement from the 37 to the 55. The 55 is the gate of the spirit. And the 25 is a gate of the spirit. The 37 is a very materialistic gate. Well, and the spirit may be many things, but the spirit itself is, how shall I say, not material. Is obviously something not material. So after the great dissolution coming with the 36, there might be a move of the collective into that direction of, let's say, more spirituality. It's not a very precise term, but it's difficult to say it more concrete. And if you see, when do we have these periods in the 25? There's a short one in 2024. There's a long one from 2025 till 2026. And still, we have it in 27, and it ends days, only days, before the first Rave child is supposed to be born. So maybe we are moving in a spiritual direction. Let's see. After that, Neptune goes to the 17, and that is really funny if you understand what it means. The 17 is the gate of understanding, of judgment, of discrimination, and of organization. And Neptune is the great dissolver. So the keynoting would be the dissolution of understanding, the dissolution of organization. Now, understanding has been the first mental quality that has developed. So it is very, very old stuff we are talking about here. How can, what sense does it make to say the dissolution of understanding? Now look, all understanding is based on pattern recognition. All understanding is based on pattern recognition. That is definitely true for the collective. I mean, imagine that incredible understanding that is necessary to organize a modern factory, or to organize the delivery of all supermarkets in a big city. It is unbelievable. And the other side is that if you are talking about patterns, a pattern, in order to be of use, must be repetitive. That's the nature of a pattern. You can trust if A, then B. That is a pattern. And if we are moving more and more into the unknown, we have seen the 25 was before, we are moving into the unknown, the old is fading away, more and more fading away, there is no useful understanding or no applicable understanding anymore because the patterns are not repeating. It is a little bit like that. Normally, you know your bus comes at 10:15, and that is a pattern. Each day the bus comes at 10:15. So then understanding makes sense. But if you one day go to the bus station and maybe the bus comes 11:15, or it comes in the afternoon, or maybe it comes tomorrow, or maybe it doesn't come anymore, there is no pattern, you know. There is no pattern you can recognize. There is no pattern you can understand. That kind of understanding doesn't make sense anymore. And the same, of course, may be true for the organizational capacity of societies. I mean, in order that all these very complicated things are happening at the correct time, working together, it demands that everything works, you know, everything. We had already in these first very small lockdowns, there were these problems that delivery chains could not be maintained and creating huge problems in production factories and so on, because some tiny parts from whatever part of the world did not arrive in time. So if that dissolves, of course, oh, that is a dissolution. And very small things here can have a great impact. So we will see. But I consider Neptune in 17 to be a time where that falling apart of the structures, the logical structures of society, is reaching a new peak. And at the end of the transit, which goes till 2029, so it's a long time, will become very obvious. And again, it's important to understand that that is not just a temporary problem, and after that we will fix it and going back to normal. We must understand that that is an ongoing process and there is no return. You know, there is no return. Then and only then we will be able to handle that on a personal level. Okay, now we still have Uranus. Uranus, as you can see, is practically is still in initiation, but not very long anymore. It moves to the second quarter. Uranus is rebellious, is revolutionary, is very unconventional. It is very often connected with modern technology. It was the planet of the Industrial Revolution. It is also the planet of the even more modern technology. So it brings something into form. Mainly the movement of Uranus says brings things into form. And it starts very soon with a very important transit. But for now, we are in the 27, still in 27. But as you can see, only till the beginning of March of this year. So the Uranus in 27 movement is finding its end. I just may remind you, 27 being the gate of nourishing, the caring gate, the growing gate actually. Not what has grown during that period of Uranus there. Modern technologies, new technologies, and new kinds of nourishing. I mean, today in huge supermarket food or food chains, they sell vegan burgers. And I mean, they do not only have it, they actually sell it. The shares of these companies that produce them are going through the roof. And Uranus always brings the sudden, the fast, not the strong movement that is very different from Neptune. Uranus you can feel on the first day. You know, it's whoosh. But it's always coming a little bit surprising, and it's always potentially a game changer. It's bringing the new, which by the way does not mean that new must be good. Do not misunderstand that. There is incredible lot of money right now is spent for, well, actually for Star Wars programs. Yeah, I mean, that's also Iranian, you know. Okay, but this Uranus in 27 is coming to an end. And it means Uranus is reaching a new quarter, is reaching the quarter of form. Well, then comes the 24. We had a lot of 24 last year when we had these 8 months with Pluto in the 61 and Uranus in the 24. The 24 is still coming now and then a little bit, as you can see, from March 21 till June, and then from October till April 2022. So it's not over yet. And here the returning, Uranus in the returning is a very, very delicate transit, because it is indicating the retro revolution, the returning of the old revolutionary thinking. I mean, Mr. Trump being a perfect example for that. But it's not only him. It's definitely not only him, and he is only expression of that. So we had in the 61, we have the new questions. They are very pressurizing. And then we have the Uranus in the 24. The 24 brings the old back. But with Uranus, it does not bring just some old back. It brings back what has been revolutionary in the past. And these have not been, how shall I say, qualities we would vote for. So, well, but still that is on the mental level. And additionally, of course, there is always the potential for truly new knowing that also can come out of that after the period of the returning of the old. However, as the time where real new stuff can come out and succeed is also coming to an end. The returning of the old seems for me to be the more dominant quality of that. And we should expect that this coming back of what has been revolutionary or rebellious some time ago, that this may be the stronger part of the transit. But already in this year, as you can see, middle of June of this year, Uranus for the first time reaches gate 2. Gate 2 is gate 2 is the first gate, you know. It says in the Rave, it is the source of everything. It is the source of everything. It is the receptive. And we have to understand how deep that is. I mean, this is a gate of orientation. It is the only gate of direction. It truly is the only gate of direction. Everything else is just an expression of it. It is the true gate of the driver. It is the gate of the driver. And what drives us? What can orient us as a society or as an individual? Only what we have receptors for. If you wouldn't have receptors for light, the visual could not be an orientation for you. If you would not have receptors for sound, the acoustic could not be an orientation for you. And in gate 2, we have the topic of an individually differentiated receptivity that leads to different orientations according to your individuality. And the general attempt is to move away from ugliness or in the direction of beauty. And normally that happens if you meet something very beautiful, it attracts you, then you move into that direction. That is obviously an orientation. Or you meet something very ugly along your way, then at least you turn away because you say, I do not want to go on in that direction anymore. So the same, of course, is true for a collective. A collective also moves in a direction. and it can meet something beautiful that seems at least to be attractive, or it can turn away from a direction that obviously leads to degeneration and ugliness. So therefore, gate 2 comes along with the idea of a sudden change of direction, a turnaround, a sudden change of direction. Now, as you can see, Uranus altogether will stay very long in that gate. So if it enters for the first time in 2021 for, let's say, a little bit more than 4 months, it does not say that we must have a huge change of direction. But it will start. It will start. A collective consists in the end of many, 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 many individuals. And many people will find a new way during the time, just individuals. And if enough individuals move in a new direction, it finally also has an impact on the collective. And of course, it will bring the great discussion. You will see, there will be the great discussion. What is the direction we want to move to as a collective, as a society, or maybe even as humanity? It becomes a huge question, a huge topic. What is the right direction? And the potential is at any time that there can be a sudden change of direction. Now, given the fact, or given what we have seen so far, I mean, we had that transit starts after the first 3 months of Pluto in the 60, and during that transit, the first time Neptune is in the 36, again, not for very long, but still. So we have the new experience, we have the crisis, we have the darkening of the light, and we have the potential for a new direction. So maybe there is not already a new direction there as a fact, but definitely the collective consciousness. So it will show up for the first time. And then as you can see, there is a second round in 2022 that has, interestingly, exactly the same length as the first one. And the big one, the one that definitely leads to a new direction, comes from September 2022 till May 2023. That is the big one, and there definitely will be a new direction. Now, again, if the new direction of the collective is something you or I will appreciate, is a very open question. It will be a new direction. And where it leads to, we will see. Well, and then how nice. Uranus in 23 splitting apart. Already starting relatively early in 2023, also altogether a long time, 527 days. So normally, if you look at the 23, we would say, okay, that is a gate of communication. It speaks in a very specific way, very individual way, very creative way, very strange way. We are in the channel of the freak or the genius. But what does that mean collectively? I mean, it's splitting apart. What is splitted apart in the 23? Well, everything that is monolithic. Everything that is monolithic. That the Rave says amorality, amorality. And amorality means, I mean, what is morality? Morality is you have one damned rule and there is no exception. That is morality. And the 23, the job of the 23, evolutionary speaking, is to bite some pieces away from that big monolithic statue of morality by pointing to a very specific exception, very specific exception. So now Uranus in 23, therefore, is an indication that the strengths of general rules, everybody for all time, always, is strongly undermined. And in my opinion, very likely, as the gate is called so, splitting apart, what will split apart? Well, as we are moving in the direction of decrease, and as we have the end of growth, what gets split apart? Everything that is too big. I mean, look at the European Union. Do you really think that will still exist in 7 years? I would be very surprised. I would be very, very surprised. Splitting apart means, well, before we had gate 2, and gate 2 says, I go my own direction. I have a different direction than you. And when the 3 says, and now we are splitting apart, you know, first we started to move in different directions, and at a certain point, that leads to splitting apart. I move on in my direction, you move on in your direction, and these directions are different. I mean, if we are talking about the time of individuality coming, that also must be mirrored on the collective level. So not every country has to follow the same rules and the same politics in the same direction. No, differentiation. Yeah, differentiation. And if differentiation gets quote unquote too strong, then you split apart because there is too little commonality. So that differentiation is not only meant for the individual, for the single individual, but also for, let's say, greater structures. And this is what I would expect during the transit. Well, and finally, funny enough, after the splitting apart comes the holding together. Again, a knowing circuit gate, as 23 has been. Technically, we know that is a gate that wants to contribute by its individuality or by its creativity. It wants to contribute to the, let's say, to the greater whole. But this has to be understood as something that takes place after the splitting apart. Because you see, if you have a differentiation first of directions, and then like moving away from each other in different directions, within that structure that still holds together, there is more wish, I would like to say, or more drive to contribute to the whole, as if you are a part of an absolutely huge, unpersonal, bureaucratic structure. I mean, nobody ever has loved the European Union. It has been seen as something valuable and safety and economy and yes, yes, yes. But I mean, it is an artifact. It is an artifact. It has not a history. It has no roots. And if you have different parts, just as an image, just as a metaphor, let's say, if different countries, let's say, move in different directions within the country, that may lead to a new kind of holding together. Yeah, that would be, let's say, yeah, it is a speculation, but in the unfolding of these movements from the 2 to the 23 to the 8, it would make sense. So, my dears, well, later, or still much later, Uranus goes in the 16, telling us that there may be new skills emerging, or that there may be new patterns emerging, or at least some people may be able to identify with. But that is a little bit too far away. Now, I understand that it is, of course, not a full picture. In order to get the full picture, we would need 2 days, because if you look at Saturn, Jupiter, and the nodes, then and only then we can see the dynamic in detail, and then the story can be told in a much more complete way. But my aim was to give you a very condensed, essential picture that allows you to prepare for what is coming, to see that that is not an easy time that is coming, and everybody should be aware of that, but at the same time, not to be afraid of that. As I have said already, you have been born for the time and you have the tools for it. And if you use these tools, I'm sure you will make a very, very important discovery. You see, we have, okay, you see, we have new bodies. We truly have new bodies. There is always the talk of the nine-centered being. The nine-centered being means you have a nine-centered body. And the nine-centered body contains abilities you are not aware yet of. There are all these funny movies like X-Men and so on, the mutants. You know, we are these X-Men, but we are not aware of it because we have been educated to believe that we are still seven-centered beings. So we treated ourselves like seven-centered beings, so we got seven-centered beings. But if you, especially under pressure and in challenge, if you start to unfold your uniqueness, you will develop your unique abilities. And this is also what we will need, our unique abilities. We have to see strategy and authority is the greatest tool we have, that's for sure. But the intelligence that comes out of that is not a fixed one. Yes, if you are a generator, responding will always be the best way. But how good is your response? That is based on your body intelligence. And the more awakened your body is, well, the more intelligent it is. That might be very helpful during these coming years. And the only way to develop that is following strategy and authority, and then and only then your true abilities can unfold and, let's say, heighten the quality of your decision making. Additionally, of course, life is much more interesting if you see more, if you are more aware, you have a more interesting and a more beautiful life. I have for this small lecture that I may have supported your awareness and that you will be able to see things coming a little bit earlier than others and be able to take advantage of that. We do not have so much time anymore. I will have a look in the chat if we have one or two questions.